start with some news that kind of came out yesterday. It's not a surprise. We've been expecting this, but the ACC is reducing their league schedule from 20 games to 18 games. And the big reason that they're doing it, at least what they're saying, is that they want to try to maximize the number of non-conference games that they are going to be able to get this season, to avoid having situations where, frankly, teams at the bottom of the league are playing teams at the bottom of the league, and you're running into, the league dragging each other down. It's a very strange occurrence here for what the ACC is doing, and it's opposite of what most of these other power conferences are doing. And Mike, I'm curious, what's your take on it, and what do you think this impact is going to be for the ACC?
Well, I think it's good that they're doing it, for one, but because it does give you more bites at the apple. But at the same time, what's the health of your conference if you're having to look outside of it to get quality opportunities? I think that's the whole point, right? So, they didn't do a good job, and they haven't done a good job the last few years of winning the games that are in front of them in non-conference. I mean, obviously North Carolina was kind of the poster child for that last year. They had the opportunities, and you win a couple of those, and you're pretty firmly in the tournament, but you don't, and so you have to sweat it on Selection Sunday. So we can get into kind of all the factors, but I will say it's the right thing to do. It's a smart thing to do, but I think it says a lot about the state of the ACC.
Yeah, where I'm kind of at with it is our friend Isaac Trotter put together a list of the non-conference games that the ACC has played against top 100 teams the last 4 seasons, right? They were 18-35 in 21-22. They were 22-33 in the 22-23 season. They were 23-37 in the 23-24 season, and they were 22-60 this past year. They had more difficult scheduling this past season. There was very clearly a narrative where the league said, we need better non-conference games from you. And the ACC overall played better non-conference games, on average about 1.5 more top 100 opponents per team in the league in total, right? And they won fewer games in 22 more opportunities against top 100 teams. None of this matters if you're not going to go out and win those games, right? That's my biggest thing is you can sit here and you can say we need all of this stuff played. You got to go out and win them, bottom line.
You're right. And I think we can get in, this probably is a conversation too we can get into with the Big 12, because the Big 12 has knocked it out of the park in terms of realignment. I mean, think about the teams that they've brought in and how that's boosted the national profile for that, and what it's done for the ACC realignment. Because what you just referenced, that the most recent season, you add Cal, you add Stanford, SMU was okay, but the realignment hasn't, as much as I think it helped them early, because they were, one of the early ones to realign, it hasn't recently. And teams have obviously caught up. But I think, and we can talk about scheduling and the strength of some of these teams, but for me, the biggest issue with the ACC over the last, let's call it 5 years, has been coaching. Like, I think there's a lot of schools that have gotten it wrong. And this isn't to single out these 3 schools, but they were very well-respected schools in the conference, good basketball tradition, that I think have pulled down that conference recently. And that's Notre Dame, Florida State, and Syracuse. Those 3 in particular. If you want to, what those 3 have in common, Rob, are they had, there were 3 teams that had coaches that probably stayed a little bit longer than they should have. And then you hit that intersection of NIL and the portal. And those 3 teams, those 3 schools who, again, really good basketball tradition, have been to 1 NCAA tournament combined in the NIL portal era. It's impossible. That should not be possible with those 3 schools. And if you want to say, hey, they've diverted resources for Notre Dame and Florida State to football, fine. But Syracuse, I think, ended up running off their biggest donor. So there's just a lot that's gone on. And we can, again, I think for what Pat Kelsey did coming in, immediately changing Louisville, immediately vaulting them to the top of the conference. I think Odom has a chance to do that. I think Will Wade has a chance to do that. We'll see how Laux ends up doing at Florida State, obviously. There's a number of coaches that have come into the league that I think can change that overall image of the league. But to me, that's where it starts.
Yeah, I would point to Syracuse specifically. Notre Dame a little bit, but I understand Notre Dame diverting resources to football. That is, Notre Dame football is one of the most iconic brands in American sports. Like, I get it. And Florida State is a football school. So I kind of get it with Florida State a little bit too. Syracuse is the one that's inexcusable to me. Syracuse is like Louisville in the sense that you have this massive fan base. You have a huge population of people that care about the orange more than just about any other sport in that area, right? Like Syracuse basketball is the professional sport of a certain area in upstate New York. Same way that Louisville is the professional sport in the city of Louisville in Kentucky and kind of the broader Louisville area. And the fact that we are looking at they've been to the tournament once since 2019, right? And even towards the end of the Jim Boeheim era, there were periods where they were sneaking in as opposed to being able to kind of be this national power that they've been in the past. Syracuse has to be better. I think Pitt has to be better. Pitt's been to one NCAA tournament since 2016, man. Like, what are we doing here? That's Pittsburgh basketball. Maybe just because I grew up on the Big East, I'm a little bit biased here. But when I think of Pitt, I'm thinking Carl Krauser. I'm thinking Levance Fields, right? I'm thinking those Jamie Dixon teams. I'm thinking Brandon Knight. I'm thinking of how tough they were. I'm thinking of how physical they were defensively. And you don't see that right now with Pitt basketball. And I think a lot of that is the way that I think Pitt built their brand was they went out and they got some of the kind of under the radar kids from the pipeline of players that are coming from those Big East cities, right? Whether it's New York, whether it's Trenton, whether it's Camden, whether it's Philadelphia, that corridor on I-95, they were able to go and just kind of pick who they wanted that wasn't picked up by the UConns and the Syracuse and the St. John's of the world. And they were able to find guys under the radar that really, really thrived in the system that they played. I don't know if they're doing that anymore, right? Do kids from New York care about playing in the ACC the way they cared about playing in the Big East? So I'm kind of with you there, which gets me back to how do we get the ACC to back to being a great basketball conference again? And I think, and tell me what you think about this, I think the biggest thing is you cannot have years where North Carolina is fighting to get into the NCAA tournament. You just can't, right? Like, the bottom of the league needs to be brought up, but it needs to start with, it has to be Duke, it has to be Carolina, and it has to be Louisville, and it has to be those three teams, and they have to be top 10 every season. It's got to be. There's enough kind of stuff dragging them down to the bottom and reasons for and excuses that are going to get made. You got to have those the top three teams in that conference be top 10-ish kind of teams in America. You just have to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those three teams have to be up there. I mean, when you talk about the resources and the tradition, the history, all that, but that's why I referenced those three schools in particular: Notre Dame, Syracuse, and Florida State, because like you still need that middle part, that kind of foundation of the conference to help you get to 5, 6, 7 bids. Because if it's either going to be, hey, it's Duke and Louisville, and UNC sneaks in there, Clemson has obviously been solid. I think Clemson was probably hanging out in the middle and just kind of found themselves at the top because a few of these schools have dropped off. But look, I think
I'll tell you what,
those three
on Brad Brownell and Clemson real quick. Like, he has done a fantastic job of taking advantage of the opportunity that has been presented to him. I said this earlier. I feel like he hasn't changed what he does, who he recruits, or the talent that he brings in. He just gets them now for a 5th year instead of a 4th year. He's able to retain them. And instead of having to go up against the likes of prime Jim Boeheim and, the North Carolina team that is competing for national championships every year, and Leonard Hamilton's Florida State and Tony Bennett in Virginia when they're at the peak of their powers. Now he's kind of going up against teams that are more similar to what Clemson was 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? And I think he's been able to take advantage of that. So shout out to him, man. Brad Brownell's indestructible.
No, he definitely is. We've seen that proven over the years. But again, this goes back to coaching. It's the same thing. This is why I keep getting back to that, because just like you mentioned with Pitt, if you go back and whatever you want to look at, Basketball Reference, Sports Reference, whatever, look at the line of demarcation of when that success stops happening. It's when Jamie Dixon left. He left and it was done. So that's my point, is once you start getting and they start nailing these coaching hires. And I think, again, Pat Kelsey was a great start to get this conference back to where it needs to be. Now you start getting the more high profile recruits, the money starts flowing in, and they'll go back to what I think was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, because I grew up, you mentioned Levance Fields, DeJuan Blair, like that Sam Young, those teams were amazing for Pitt. But it was just a different type of athleticism that was in the conference. Like the ACC has all of a sudden become, to me, probably the least athletic power conference. Am I wrong about that?
No.
Okay.
You're right.
Like that's kind of where it starts. Because then if you don't have the athletes, you aren't going to do anything in non-conference. Because you're going to go up against a lot of these schools from the Big 12 and SEC that are going to run you off the floor at times. We've seen.
I have a take on that, and I'm curious what you think about this. I think we've seen the investment the SEC has made in basketball from an NIL perspective, from a coaching hire perspective, from upgrading facilities perspective, and I think that now all of those kids from the South that were like, I got to get to NC State, I got to get to Wake, I got to find a way to be able to get to North Carolina. Like those are the schools that they're pining for. I'll go to Florida State because Leonard Hamilton's going to, break me off something and, they're going to get me to the NBA. Now it's like they're ending up at Auburn and they're ending up at Alabama, and the ACC is not the place where the talent-rich areas of the South are sending their best players. And I think it's just as simple as that. I